Warm welcome to you all, wherever you are on this beautiful planet. This is the autumn trimester of the Great Books course at Ubiquity University, and we are super eager to hear from Dr. Michelle Blair, the second session on Carl Gustav Jung on nature, technology, and modern life. So over to you, dear Michelle.
Thank you, Georgie. I'm going to share my screen now. All right. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining me today on part 2 on C.G. Jung on nature, technology, and modern life. In the first section of this lecture, I introduced some of Jung's interests in ancient thought and philosophies, with a particular focus on the influence of the Gnostics. Today, I'd like to expand on that, but briefly exploring Jung's engagement with alchemy before diving into the final chapters of this book. Jung played a key role in reviving modern alchemical thought, particularly as it relates to our connection with nature. At the end of part 1 of this last lecture, we encountered an image of the philosopher's stone. Jung believed that Christianity sought to save humanity, but often at the expense of nature, whereas the alchemist's dream was to redeem the world in its totality. The genuine alchemists of the Western tradition were, in a sense, early forerunners of ecology, as they engaged imaginatively with the processes of nature. This guiding principle for working with the imagination was, quote, moral as much as physical, unquote. The Greek word ethos refers to something felt as moral, regulated by subjective awareness. This concept differs significantly from what is traditionally viewed as morality, based on laws and rules, expressed particularly in biblical literature. Alchemy in this sense could be seen as a form of proto-ecology. Mythologist John Lamb Lash suggests that psychology should serve as the framework for a conscious relationship with nature, putting the psyche back into an environmental context. This understanding challenges modern psychology because it fails to answer where the true habitat of the human soul lies and where psychic processes truly occur. Through Jung's writings, we come to see that the true habitat of the psyche is, in fact, nature. Throughout Earth Has a Soul, Jung expresses concern about our relationship with nature, emphasizing the importance of immersion in the natural world. For Jung, the senses are crucial in experiencing space and time in a new way, one that is both imaginative and sensuous. While archetypes may emerge from human imagination, they do not exist in some detached interspace, separate from the material world and sensory impressions. Instead, they fluctuate in the medial space where mind and nature converge. Alchemists refer to this intermediate space as the ambient, a term borrowed from the Greek astronomer Ptolemy, who in turn derived it from ancient mysteries. Chapter 4, The Primitive Knows How to Converse with the Soul. Jung says, in olden times, the ancestral souls live in pots and kitchen. Lares and Penates are important psychological personages who should not be frightened away by too much modernity. In this chapter, Sabini compiles writings that delve into the concept of the archaic man and the natural mind, which has evolved over millions of years. Unlike the modern mind, which has become disconnected from this instinctual and undifferentiated way of being, the archaic mind remains attuned to the natural world. Jung believed that dreams are living processes, serving as guides throughout our lives in ways that the rational mind often ignores. Drawing from his encounters from tribal cultures and his connection to the primitive within myself, Jung assessed the deep wisdom of the archaic mind. As Sabini points out, because the archaic mind does not divide the subjective from the objective, it can communicate directly with spirits in nature. In ancient understanding, the soul was viewed as immortal, existing both before and after inhabiting a physical body. The primitive conception of the soul is often symbolized by fire or flame, with warmth representing the essence of life. The soul is also intimately connected to one's name, rooted in the belief that naming a child after an ancestor reincarnates that ancestor's soul within the newborn. The primitive psyche is the wellspring of life, and the primitive person knows how to communicate with their soul. The soul speaks within them, acting as an objective, self-sustaining force that lives its own life within the human. Additionally, the land they inhabit reflects the landscape of their unconscious mind. For instance, being born in Texas, a land of pioneers where the West begins, means that those pioneering qualities are a part of me, linked to the spirit of the land from which I come. The primitive bush soul embodies a symbiotic relationship with the various elements of the environment. However, modern man's rationalism has severed this deep connection with nature. According to Jung, this disconnection exacted revenge through artistic movements like Futurism and Dadaism, which reflected the fragmented state of the modern psyche. The modern man controls himself and dismisses the somatic basis of the psyche. These intellectual forces have not disappeared, but instead they resurface in our dream images. While the primitive mind constructs elaborate ceremonies to engage with deeper forces, modern man has few rituals. When modern man feels insecure, he may offer a brief prayer or say a word, whereas the primitive creates an entire emotional and spiritual field for union and action. Jung's travels allowed him to see the archaic elements that still exist within modern man, the underlying similarities between the two. For example, both share comparable thought processes and dreams. However, the primitive places far greater significance on the messages revealed in dreams, distinguishing between ordinary dreams and those with collective importance. Ordinary dreams are often dismissed, which might explain why the modern man frequently pays little attention to them. More likely, however, is modern man's rationalism that has dulled his ability to respond to numinous symbols. In the process of overcoming superstitions, man has also lost the spiritual values that once grounded his deepest morality. This loss has come at a tremendous cost, resulting in a profound dissociation from others and from the earth itself. These spiritual values are the very roots of meaning in life. Without them, social structures begin to disintegrate and morality deteriorates. When humanity has truly lost, is the sense of mystery, the capacity to integrate these deeper powers into a coherent framework. Without this integration, there can be no wholeness. As Jung exclaimed, nothing is holy any longer. Here, Jung reiterates a Gnostic concept. Belief and disbelief in God are merely surrogates for direct experience. He argues that people speak of belief only when they have lost their own immediate personal knowledge. Modern man lives in half a world, merely believing in the existence of the other half. In contrast, the primitive lives in a unified world where dreams and daily life are inseparable. Jung humorously remarks that we have blotted out our spiritual development by fabricating artificial light to mimic the life-giving sun. Jung also delves into modern man's disconnect from myths, which he views as a kind of disease. He argues that contemporary society misunderstands myth, failing to recognize it as essential for spiritual growth and development. I would like to expand on the importance of myth, as it has served throughout history as a universal means of conveying the deeper truths of life. Myth functions as a regenerative force, allowing individuals to internalize and assimilate their primal experiences so they can revisit and draw from them in the future. In contrast, the traditional Western approach often begins with an experience that is later codified into sacred scripture, demanding belief and leading to rigid rules and commandments. Without an understanding of myth, historians and anthropologists may sometimes misinterpret symbols and rituals. For example, the deep connection indigenous society have with animals is often misread as worship, when in reality it reflects a connection to the qualities these animals represent. For example, a bear represents strength, power, and introspection. Many tribes believe that bears have medicinal properties. They can help with physical and emotional healing as well. Mythologist Joseph Campbell explained that myths were designed to align the mind with the body and life with the natural order, embedding life's essential mysteries into the psyche. Through myth, social symbols provide the imagery needed to live by linking individuals with a central mystery that activates their sense of reality. Jung elaborates on this idea, stating, "He is born once in a specific historical setting, with specific historical qualities, and therefore he is only complete when he has a relation to these things. It is just as if you were born without eyes and ears when you were growing up with no connection to the past." He emphasized that an individual's connection to myth and history is essential for achieving personal wholeness and gaining a deeper understanding of life. On a personal note, as part of my dissertation process, I was involved in delving deeply into my own rich history of Texas. In doing so, I cultivated my own roots, drawing strength from the soil of my birthplace. Jung further argues that many of modern man's difficulties arise from losing contact with our instincts, a deep well of wisdom that resides within each of us. Despite the advancements of civilization, the core of every person's psyche is still shaped by the archaic man. This archaic aspect holds the key to our deeper instincts and intuition, and it must be acknowledged if we are to achieve true psychological balance. The primitive's relationship with spirits, magic, and medicines was fundamentally different from that of modern man. For example, when an elderly person dies, the primitive does not attribute the death to disease, but to magic, believing either a spirit has taken the person or that sorcery is involved. In this worldview, the only natural death occurs in battle. Magic plays a central role in the life of the primitive, who assumes that invisible and arbitrary powers govern all events. While modern man might refer to such occurrences as chance, the primitive understands them as intentional acts. This belief compels the primitive to adapt to nature and its overarching laws, motivated by a deep fear of the unpredictable, incalculable forces that may intervene at any moment. As Jung once heard someone say, "Magic is the science of the jungle," a statement that perfectly captures this mindset. The primitive's belief in arbitrary powers is deeply rooted in his direct experience of the world. His observational skills are extraordinary, allowing him to connect chains of events in ways that modern man often struggles to comprehend. This heightened awareness also enables the primitive to shift the course of action or change a psychic attitude in response to what he perceives. Jung observes, "In the face of something extraordinary, it is not he who is astonished, but rather the thing which is astonishing. It's mana, endowed with magic power. Jung further explains that for the primitive, his country is neither a geographical nor political entity. It is that territory which contains his mythology, his religion, all his thinking and feeling, insofar as he is unconscious of these functions. For the primitive, the land and mind are inseparable, with his physical environment mirroring his spiritual and psychological landscape. Jung reminds us that the primitive man is unpsychological, meaning that psychic events occurs outside of him in an objective way. For the primitive, even dreams are not internal experiences, but are perceived as real external events. In contrast, modern man often projects what is unconscious within himself onto others, shaping his actions and perceptions based on these projections. Today, our methods of harming one another have become more socially acceptable, typically manifesting as moral judgments rather than the physical violence. Unlike the modern psyche, when the primitive man attributes a bush soul to someone, it is free from the poison of moral judgment. The primitive is too naturalistic, too focused on things as they are, to impose such judgments. He lives in direct relation to nature, making him far less inclined to the moralizing tendencies that are so prevalent in modern life. In this chapter, Jung explains how witchcraft and the mana theory, believing in a widely distributed power in the external world that produces extraordinary effects, are integral to the primitive worldview. For the primitive, everything exists by virtue of its inherent energy. Being itself a field of force, and objects possess their own beauty, independent of our perception. Beauty is not something we create. It is something that inherently exists. Yet the primitive mind is full of contradictions. For instance, they have no clear idea of what happens after death. They knew what they did was not always why they did it. In many ways, modern man still retains traces of his bush soul. Consider, for example, we put up Christmas trees or we hunt Easter eggs. These traditions are practiced without fully understanding their deeper significance. Like the primitive man who raises his hands to the sun at daybreak, offering his living soul to the sun to receive mana, the life force, we too engage in rituals that connect us to something deeper, even if we do not consciously realize it. These rituals are patterns in our soul. In a sense, we still know how to make magic. Chapter 5. We have conquered nature is a mere slogan. Natural life is the nourishing soil of the soul. In this chapter, Jung expresses his deep concern over humanity's attempt to conquer nature through technical skill and technology. As discussed in the previous chapter, the primitive mind approached the world with reverence, seeing it as something sacred requiring respect and care. To be authentically human, Jung argues, we must recognize nature's sanctity and respond appropriately. For instance, when a person plants a rose and eats a yam or holds a newborn child, these actions are not merely technological tasks as they are often perceived in the modern sense. To the indigenous mind, such acts are intrinsic connections with the natural world. It is this way of treating nature, of recognizing and honoring its sacredness, that defines our humanity. Any deviation from this reverence risks not only disconnection from nature, but also a fundamental loss of our own innate human essence. And now I thought it might be helpful to explore the root of the word technology. According to Lash, the Greek word techne means how to, or the skill to perform an action. translator of classical Greek texts on science and philosophy, often rendered techne as arts, referring to activities such as the art of weaving or the art of canoe making, where both knowledge and technique are essential. The first component of techne is knowledge, and the second is the application of that knowledge. It always involves a technique, a skillful method to perform an action. The primary tool for any action is the human body. For example, paddling a canoe is an art of techne because it requires a specific technique, blending both the knowledge of how to paddle and the physical skill to do it effectively. This ancient understanding of techne emphasizes that technology at its core is deeply human, rooted in the body's ability to act in concert with knowledge. The indigenous mind, however, is highly conservative in its approach to technology. Native people would view a technology that constantly requires improvement or upgrades as inherently defective. The very concept of upgrades would be antithetical to their way of thinking. They believed in a form of self-regulation that has been nullified the modern society's growing population and technological advancements. For indigenous culture, a peaceful and sustainable society is one that preserves humanity's right relationship with its habitat. The indigenous mind inherently understands the importance of self-limitation, recognizing that when technology begins to outpace its creators, it risks driving human activities out of balance with nature. This wisdom reflects a fundamental awareness that technological advancement, unchecked by respect for natural limits, can lead to disharmony with the environment, a lesson modern society increasingly neglects in the pursuit of progress. This understanding of the indigenous mind helps clarify Jung's caution regarding overpopulation and the backlash of technology that has sought to conquer nature. We have not eliminated the demons in our nature. Rather, they have been driven into the unconscious, where they wait for their reckoning. Jung observes that our intellect has created a new world that dominates nature, filling it with monstrous machines. He states, man is bound to follow the exploits of this scientific and inventive mind and to admire himself for his splendid achievements. Yet Jung warns that nature will eventually turn against man and his creations using catastrophic forces in response. Despite our impressive technological advancements, man has not yet learned how to correct his course or recognize the consequences of his actions. Jung further laments that there are no longer any gods whom we can invoke to help us. The great religions of the world suffer from increasing anemia because the noumena have fled the woods, rivers, mountains, and animals, and the godmen have disappeared underground into the unconscious. Jung helps us understand the consequences of conquering nature through technology, as this disrupts humanity's ability to live in harmony with the environment. This disconnection leads to a psychological incapacity for mutual understanding, replacing balance with struggles for superiority and dominance. As modern man strives to train his will in the pursuit of freedom, he simultaneously distances himself from his instincts. Progress, coupled with our increasingly differentiated consciousness, is constantly at risk of becoming uprooted from its natural foundations. This separation leaves man vulnerable to inner conflict and disconnection from his true nature, the deeper sources of wisdom that reside in the instinctual layers of the psyche. The impact of living out of scale with nature has profound consequences. Jung addresses the breathless drive for power within the Western mind a drive fueled by insatiable greed and the relentless pursuit of more. While this drive may seem beneficial in eliminating certain evils and advancing civilization, it comes at a tremendous cost, namely the loss of spiritual culture. Modern man is rarely content with what is necessary. Instead, he is trapped in a perpetual search for more and better, always looking outside himself for fulfillment. Despite his outward successes, modern man remains inwardly unchanged. Jung illustrates this by pointing out that a man will lament his poverty if he possesses only one automobile, while others have two. In this state, things lose their deeper meaning. For when the inner self does not evolve alongside external achievements, material gains become hollow. The sickness of Western man lies in his insatiability, which he perceives as an inherent right. This one-sided attitude leads to significant disturbances in his psyche. The uprooted individual, whether European or American, must not only reconnect with nature, but more importantly, with his own inner nature. The crucial task is to rediscover the natural man within. According to Jung, contemporary man must recognize his inferiority to the forces of nature, both around and within himself. He cannot act without consequences, for if he disregards his inner nature, his psyche will rebel, often in self-destructive ways. In an effort to cope with inner turmoil and the pressures of modern life, man increasingly turns to substances like pills, alcohol, and tobacco, as well as rigid dietary regimes. Jung suggests that these are modern equivalents of the demons and gods that once held sway over human existence. The modern cultural mind reveals signs of dissociation and disorientation, largely due to the loss of connection with the myths and symbols essential for integrating the human psyche. Without this integration, individuals remain fragmented, disconnected from deeper sources of meaning. Jung offers a profound insight. While the West is predominantly characterized by extroversion and the East by introversion, both cultures share a common ambition to conquer the naturalness of life. Whether through external domination or internal control, both wield mind over matter as a central principle of consciousness. However, Jung predicts that in time, this concept of conquest will cease to be the ultimate ideal. By the end of chapter 5, Jung reflects on the loss of nature's demonism. As demons were expelled from the natural world, they found a more perilous home within humanity. With every significant achievement comes an equally weighty consequence. People often fail to recognize that each step forward is counterbalanced by an equivalent step backwards. Jung explores the profound impact Christianity had on the pagan world. By driving away the old gods and replacing them with a singular God, Christianity desacralized nature, subordinating it to human reason. This shift, further intensified by the rise of science, eroded the original spiritual connection with nature, which Jung saw as a peril for the soul. However, he reminds us that these ancient spirits continue to dwell in the human psyche, untouched by the progress of enlightened minds. Jung also reflects on the consequence of mass population growth on nations. He argues that the greater the accumulation of the masses, the lower the intelligence and morality. He believed that Switzerland, due to its small size and slower pace of modernization, was safeguarded from these effects. Looking to the future, Jung warns of the potential rise of world organizations, living space, and economic blocks. He stresses that while technology advances, it must be tempered with wisdom in its application, or else the demons of human nature will wreak havoc. Chapter 6, Our Civilizing Potential Has Led Us Down the Wrong Path. Nature is an incomparable guide if you know how to follow her. In this chapter, Sabine includes interviews where Jung explores the profound impact of technology on the human psyche. Jung initially viewed gadgets as merely delightful wish fulfillments, noting that while they may offer surface-level conveniences, they do little to enrich the mind or heart. He points out a striking paradox. Time-saving devices do not, in fact, save us time. Instead, they fill our days so completely that we often feel there's never enough time. I can certainly relate to that. In one of the excerpts, Jung discusses the first technology, words. He argues that reality has been replaced by words, and our obsession with facts generates so much information that it overwhelms our ability to process it. Facts bury us, he says, reflecting on the overload of information that stifles genuine understanding. Jung contrasts two ways of life. The farmer who lives close to the earth, grounded in natural rhythm that is in sync with his unconscious, and the city dweller, whom he calls the modern machine minder, far removed from his rhythm and wonder. Instead of being connected to nature, modern individuals often belong to numerous clubs and groups, reflecting a need for constant social engagement. He observes that men join as many clubs as there are days in the week, while women participate in societies where they pour out their admiration for the latest cultural hero. It's remarkable that Jung made these observations in the 1930s, well before the advent of today's Apple technology. Even then, he noted that the strains and stresses of modern life had impaired our ability to concentrate. At the time, technologies Jung referred to were cinema, radio, and television, along with the constant hum of motor cars and airplanes. He highlights how these forms of overstimulation, from music playing in restaurants to the noise of city life, drown out our capacity for genuine listening. According to Jung, this bombardment of superficial stimuli leads to nervous exhaustion, resulting in a craving for more stimulation, impatience, irritability, and indecisiveness. Yet none of these conveniences foster the cultivation of the mind or heart. Jung also critiques the rapid pace of technological progress, which he argues leaves the unconscious mind unable to assimilate it. He observes that cultural order has long suppressed the feminine quality of disorderliness, and this repression finds expression in modern art movements that embrace disorder. For Jung, this artistic chaos, quote, clears the air by abolishing the constraints of order. Next, Jung delves into the concept of archetypes. Archetypes are primordial forms that lie hidden beneath the surface, revealing themselves through images. When individuals stray from the archetypal realm, this deviation leads to a kind of dissociation from our primitive roots, referred to as a loss of soul. This disconnection manifests as the loss of vitality. Jung places significant importance on our ancestral lineage. He asserts that the individual psyche is not something entirely new, but rather a recombination of ancient components passed down through generations. This deep connection to the past makes humans instinctively wary of novelty. According to Jung, we are far from having fully integrated our primitive nature. The loss of connection with our ancestral roots has left us uprooted, contributing to the widespread discontent we experience today. As we progress further, we distance ourselves from these roots, effectively demolishing our connection to the past. Jung warns that this severing of ties with the past paves the way for future discontent, manifesting as feelings of insufficiency, dissatisfaction, and restlessness. In essence, we have not caught up with ourselves. He reflects on the paradox of freedom, knowing that everything is better purchased at the price of something worse. Jung expresses serious concerns about the dangers facing America, pointing to its Puritan ancestry as a key factor. The Puritans brought with them a deep attachment to abstraction, the idea of God, and were willing to sacrifice everything for that ideal. Jung warns, abstract thought is always ruthless. And he claims that America is largely ignorant of the risk it faces. If Americans fail to master their machines, they will risk being devoured by them. Jung highlights the uprooted nature of American life, which leads to a disconnection from the unconscious. This can be seen in the rebellious youth and widespread drug abuse, symptoms of the growing divorce from nature. He argues that when a society is so detached from its natural roots, the unconscious mind must be pacified in unhealthy ways. Jung also reflects on the balance between pleasure and misery in life, noting that civilization comes at a great cost. He defines real progress as the psychological adaptation to various forms of misery. To understand this, one must see beyond the surface of social welfare. The more a society tries to minimize obvious forms of suffering, the more it finds itself imprisoned by new, complex, and incomprehensible variants of unhappiness, such as divorce and neurosis. Technology and social welfare, Jung stresses, do not resolve spiritual stagnation. If civilization is to survive, he emphatically states, we must rediscover the unconscious, an immense spiritual task. Jung traces how the Western mind became divided. While still in the evolutionary stage of polytheism, Western consciousness was forced underground, where it has remained over 2,000 years. The development of Christian doctrines of grace and love split the conscious and the unconscious parts of the Western mind. In becoming free from irrationality and instinct, humanity also lost its individuality. Consciousness, with its orderliness and rationality, domesticated and conditioned man, but this alone is not the ideal path to civilization. True civilization, Jung argues, comes from seeing man as a whole, integrating both his higher and lower parts, the unconscious with the conscious with the primitive. In a dialogue between Dr. Barnes and Jung, a few key insights emerge. Jung compares the creation of machines of transforming irrational forces into rational power, essentially turning dragons into machines. Over time, however, after pouring all of our energy into rational forms, these creations will eventually strangle us. This, he says, is why psychology is so essential. Jung also notes that large organizations and institutions have a tendency to devour themselves. In densely populated cities like New York, the, quote, insane, unquote, are not easily identified. They are sick souls, though not institutionalized. He believes Americans must learn to reject the complexity of modern life, as their souls crave simplicity. This yearning for simplicity is becoming evident in the dreams of his patients. Dreams, according to Jung, are the body's most natural way of signaling that something is wrong, calling our attention back to our instinctual lives. Next, Jung explains the effects of technology on the human psyche. Jung believed that technology, though created by man, has an inherent capacity for adaptation. He argued that the repetitive procedures involved in technological work correspond to primitive aspects of human nature. In primitive societies, daily techniques and tasks, though monotonous, often induce an unconscious state similar to ecstatic experiences. However, in modern times, instincts have become atrophied. Long workdays in factories, Jung warned, could lead to a slum mentality. To counter this, he emphasized the importance of personal ownership, spending time on one's own property or land. He compared doing only mechanical work to an unbalanced diet, which can damage the body and soul. Jung asserted that every person needs a plot of land to reconnect with their instincts. This connection to land is psychologically vital, and nothing can substitute for it. We often forget that we are still primates, and we acknowledge the primitive layers of our psyche. The industrial worker detached from the land becomes rootless, and the wages earned, though tangible, remain abstract. Jung believed that we all need nourishment for the psyche, not just the body. He also pointed out that many people seek the kingdom of God in the external world rather than within their own souls, a tendency especially pronounced in socialism. Individuation, according to Jung, is both an upward and a downward process. Without the body, there is no mind, and there's no individuation. Our focus on civilization's progress has led us down the wrong path, neglecting the essential aspects of our nature. Jung further stressed the importance of projecting oneself into the world around us. Everything in our environment is part of us, which is why he argued living in a rented apartment could be disastrous. Such spaces offer few opportunities for personal expression. In a standardized apartment and standardized surroundings, it is easy to lose one's sense of individuality. Similarly, collective farming lacks soul because it deprives individuals of the opportunity for personal expression. For Jung, human existence should be deeply rooted in the earth. He also identified noise as one of the great evils of modern life. In schools, for example, despite efforts to improve curricula, constant distraction make it difficult to concentrate. Children often complete their work to the accompaniment of music or external stimuli. As so much is fed into them from the outside, children can no longer feel the need to generate their own thoughts or creative impulses. This is symptomatic of urban civilization, where technological gadgets and the threat of overpopulation have created a general sense of fear. In this context, noise becomes welcome. It drowns out inner fears, instinctive warnings. Noise, like crowds, offers comfort by making people feel they are not alone. It shields us from painful reflection and scatters our anxious dreams, creating a collective racket that prevents deeper contemplation. Jung noted that many are afraid of silence. Silence, he said, forces us to confront our inner selves. Sometimes people instinctively avoid. For Jung, noise has a hypnotic effect, keeping us from hearing the deeper truths within. Chapter 7. We know nothing of man. What if consciousness has no root in the earth? Sabini opens this chapter with a striking statement from Jung. Not famine, not earthquakes, not cancer, but we are the great danger. While this may initially seem to echo a Christian notion of sin or shame, Jung's message goes beyond that. He speaks of humanity's fractured relationship with natural laws, our extroverted way of life, along with our educational system that emphasizes outer realities, has left us ill-equipped to deal with the deeper forces of the psyche. We have mastered physical self-protection, yet we lack the knowledge to safeguard ourselves psychically. Jung warned about mass solutions, which tend to dilute individuality and personal responsibility. He believed that stable communities could only arise through natural maturation processes. His urging was clear. We must become more interested in understanding human nature. Through our conscious mind, though our conscious minds may struggle to find a clear path forward, Jung believed that our million-year-old psyche holds profound wisdom. It is essential for humanity to acknowledge the evil within itself, or at the very least, to understand the contradiction that while we strive to do good, we often cause harm. Jung suggests that we must confront our darker instincts, proposing that we symbolically sacrifice something to the gods of war to satisfy our inherent thirst for conflict and bloodshed. When discussing politics, Jung is direct. 99% of political actions are mere symptoms of deeper issues, not solutions to social evils. He argues that politics poisons the already flawed minds of the masses, and collective measures intended to address these issues often backfire, reinforcing the very mass-mindedness we seek to remedy. To fight collectivism, Jung insisted we must place value on the individual. It is only through personal development and responsibility that we can begin to address the deeper problems plaguing society. Jung observed that the modern environment often strengthens a dangerous tendency, the expectation that solutions come from external sources, rather than recognizing challenges as opportunities for growth through effort and suffering. True growth, he emphasizes, requires self-reflection and leads to understanding the real man as opposed to the statistical man. Change, Jung insists, must begin with the individual. We cannot wait for others to act. Personal responsibility for our own transformation is paramount. In today's world, man must realize that neither great religions nor philosophies provide the certainty and security we seek. This insight reminds me of something I learned while studying indigenous intelligence. Indigenous cultures understood that truth is fluid and ever-changing, unlike modern society, which tends to value external achievements over deep self-awareness. Modern man often engages in activities that appear spiritual, such as the right yoga, adhering to strict diets, or memorizing mystical texts, not because he believes in his own inner wisdom, but because he lacks faith that anything valuable could emerge from his own soul. We often become absorbed in external activism, trying to save the world. Yet our greatest ailment lies within our own souls. One impact of transcendent theology, particularly Christianity, is that it often excludes the body, focusing solely on the spirit. However, the body is the vessel of life, and each individual is the bearer of that life. True healing and transformation must integrate both spirit and body, recognizing the importance of self-awareness and inner work. Jung also critiques the materialistic mindset with which we approach possessions, emphasizing that we have lost touch with the meaning and purpose behind things we seek. He warns that atrophy of instinct is equivalent to pathological suggestibility, the devastating effects of which may be witnessed in the recurrent psychic epidemic of totalitarian madness. This loss of instinct makes us vulnerable to manipulation, a danger Jung was keenly aware of in his time, and one that still resonates today. Once again, Jung revisits the idea of conservatism and the perspective of the indigenous mind. He argues that only humans are extravagant in their behaviors, often assuming that animals who faithfully follow natural laws are somehow inferior because they seem less reasonable than us. For example, when a pig wallows in the mud, we view it as dirty. However, from the pig's perspective, it is perfectly reasonable behavior. The pig, a law-abiding citizen of nature, is simply fulfilling its natural role. The fundamental difference between humans and animals is that animals obey nature without question, whereas humans believe they possess their own power. Animals experience mana, a natural force that works through them, while humans, in their disobedience to nature, extracts energy from it and claim it as their own willpower. Jung warns that this borrowed power, originally belonging to the natural world, can overtake humanity and cause harm. This is a form of psychological inflation, where man believes he has stolen something from the gods, only to be punished later. In contrast, the natural mind is content with the beauty of the earth, remaining in harmony with the world around it. Jung also highlights the Dionysian mysteries, which aim to reconnect people with their animal nature. Like humans, animals experience both joy and suffering. Jung believed that a bridge exists between the self and the primordial man hidden beneath layers of history. When rooted in this connection, individuals are less likely to get lost in abstract ideas and more inclined to live in harmony with their true nature. However, when someone connects deeply with their animal nature, the deepest part of the collective unconscious, it can create tremendous inner conflict. The desire to live as an animal becomes just as powerful as the spiritual impulse, and this struggle often brings suffering. Jung believed that there was a deep meaning in this conflict, as it brings both the cultural and primal self to the forefront. Jung also discusses group consciousness and its root in primitive societies. The primitive mind assumes that what pleases me must please everyone, with little distinction between I and you. This explains why sometimes we persecute those who think differently, a remnant of our primordial past. We impose our beliefs on others out of fear of standing alone in our convictions. Psychologically, as Jung noted, is a young science. While individual psyches vary, the collective unconscious remains constant. Nothing in the primordial world of the psyche has ever been lost. It continues to influence us in ways we may not fully understand. Jung warned of two great dangers to the soul: the loss of soul and possession. What we now describe as schizoid states could be understood as moments when the soul wanders away and another force takes over. This can manifest as mood swings, unpredictability, or sudden aversions to once loved activities. Jung observed that seemingly normal people can fall prey to this kind of possession. Just as individuals experience dissociation, so do nations. According to Jung, the political and social conditions, the fragmentation of religion and philosophy, the contending schools of modern art and psychology all have one meaning: dissociation and sickness. For Jung, consciousness is both the greatest gift and the greatest curse. While it brings self-awareness and progress, it also leads to fragmentation, both within individuals and across societies. Jung believed that healing requires reconnecting with the source of all inner conflicts. He suggested that civilizations don't decay, but regenerate, though modern man may struggle to grasp this idea. Often people suffer from the disease of knowing everything better, convinced that their psyche is self-made and guided solely by reason and will. This mindset is nearly impenetrable, filled with opinions, societal structures, and professional biases. The subtle germ of new growth, which could reconnect us with our true selves in the world, is easily overlooked. Jung pointed to dreams as the way forward. Though often dismissed, dreams hold the key to transformation, connecting us to the deeper layers of the psyche. Jung describes dreams as a hidden little door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul, opening into the cosmic night, which was psyche long before there was ego consciousness. While ego consciousness isolates and discriminates, dreams allow us to reconnect with the universal, eternal, still whole, and unseparated from nature. In the ancient civilizations, a powerful dream was seen as a message from the gods, a bridge to the divine. Dreams allowed individuals to transcend the ego's limitations and reconnect with the collective unconscious, the primordial psyche that remains beneath modern consciousness. In today's spiritually confused world, dreams offer guidance when other remedies fail. They are a pure expression of nature, revealing unfiltered truth. By reflecting on our dreams, we reflect on ourselves, and it takes great courage to uncover their insights. Dream interpretation once associated with witchcraft and feared by the church. Jung advised treating every dream as though it were a completely unknown object. Carry it with you. Let your imagination play with it and explore it with others. The meaning of a dream often depends on the intentions of the interpreter, but it cannot be dictated or fully understood through knowledge alone. Each dream is infused with the unique experience of the dreamer, and some carry collective meaning, containing mythological motifs and symbolism. Jung also emphasized that modern education fails to prepare us for the fullness of our being. Since cultural values are created by individuals, each person must strive to put themselves right first, reconnecting with their inner life and integrating the wisdom found in their dreams. Our last chapter, chapter 8, Nature must not win but cannot lose. I am fully committed to the idea that human existence should be rooted in the earth. In the final chapter, Jung addresses the evolutionary challenge we face. Rather than regressing to nature, we must preserve and deepen the level of consciousness we've achieved, enriching it with the wisdom of our primordial origins. We are caught between the conflict of our animal and spiritual natures, and healing arises through reconnecting with nature, both externally and internally, such as through dreams. Ancient mystery rites embrace both approaches, seeking balance between the conscious and the unconscious. Just as the indigenous people lived in harmony with their surroundings, we too must learn to coexist with both our unconscious and conscious minds, fostering cooperation instead of dominance, or by either. One of Jung's favorite stories in this chapter is about the Taoist shaman who brought rain to a drought-stricken village. This story highlights the importance of restoring balance, offering a new way of being in the modern world. A crucial part of our evolutionary experience is the growth of consciousness, for without it, things fall apart. Although humanity has mastered the physical world, it has yet to master the unconscious. All direct experience is psychic, and reality can only be perceived psychically. Civilized individuals often live guided solely by their consciousness, perceiving the unconscious as hostile. This attitude risks severing their connection with instinct, a loss magnified by urban living. Jung argued that this disconnection from instinct is largely responsible for the pathological state of contemporary culture. This picture I took at the altar of Chartres. Here you can see the remnants of pagan culture through these animal figures. Unfortunately, symbols such as these that once connected us to our pagan roots are vanishing in religious traditions. These symbols, rooted in the archetypal realm, are vital for reconnecting us to our origins. Engaging with archetypes allows us to give form and meaning to our instincts. Archetypes are the hidden foundations of the conscious mind, connecting our psyche to both the earth and the larger world. In this chapter, Jung also delves into the thontic powers of the earth and offers insight into the Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Egypt. Contrary to spiritual interpretations, these mysteries were grounded in rituals that symbolized the collaboration between earth and higher man. Jung also recounts the rites of Athenian noblewomen who celebrated mysteries of their own, excluding men. These rites involved telling obscene jokes to ensure the fertility of the fields for the coming season. For these women, the earth within and around them was one. Jung suggests this connection with the earth is difficult for modern women to grasp if they have become uprooted from their natural identity. In contrast, women in Africa traditionally own the plantation, being seen as one with the land, embodying the dignity of the earth. They are deeply connected to their piece of land, grounding them in a role that reflects their relationship with nature. In this sense, they are not, as Jung puts it, up in the air, disconnected from their earthly roots. The serpent, a common ancient symbol, represents the earth's magic and power. Serpent motifs, like this one with Christ standing on the serpent at Shard's south portal, reflects this thontic symbolism. Jung argues that symbol formation is a return to nature, a reconstruction of our relationship with it. Symbols like the serpent remind us of our lost primordial connections. The psychic depths are nature itself, embodying the essence of creative life. While the nature destroys, it also regenerates. When values are dismantled by modern relativism, the psyche will naturally restore their equivalents. Upon looking inward, we may first encounter darkness, but light and beauty are born from enduring it. When faced with challenges, we instinctively avoid uncertainty, seeking clear, immediate results. Yet true progress can only be made by journeying through darkness. One of modern man's greatest misconceptions is the belief that profound change happens instantly. Essential transformation, or even minor improvement, is always a slow, gradual process. Rootlessness breeds meaninglessness, and this loss of meaning is a soul sickness of our age. True innovation comes from below, not above, just as trees grow upward from the earth, not downward from the sky. History quietly prepares itself in the collective unconscious, and when archetypes are activated, they shape real events. Jung offers a suggestion. When confronted with a problem, reflect on it before going to bed and pay attention to your dreams. Perhaps the great man, the 2 million-year-old man, will speak. The book concludes with the story of the Rainmaker, illustrating synchronicity rather than causality. The rainmaker does not make rain, but aligns himself with the Tao, and the rain follows. The message is that when one's attitude is in harmony, the right things happen. Disorder in the world reflects our internal imbalance. If we were to align with the Tao, we would recognize that these things are as they should be. A key lesson is that harmony and chaos coexist. Order is restored when internal harmony is achieved. The rainmaker understood that the chaos around him was a reflection of his internal state. To resolve the external disorder, he withdrew for 3 days, bringing heaven and earth into balance within himself. This approach differs from the Christian focus on helping others, often without considering the state of the helper. Jung's story shifts the perspective, suggesting that true healing begins within. At the chapter's end, Jung advises Mrs. N to trust her unconscious as though it were a loving father. However, he reminds her that the unconscious is incomplete without the conscious mind. Destiny is shaped through the collaboration of both. He emphasized the importance of connection to the earth, advising Mrs. N to nurture her relationship with her land. The earth, he says, longs for her children, houses, plants, trees, to grow from her. This nurturing connection between the psyche and the Great Mother counters the extroversion of modern life. To conclude, I cite a fragment from a Gnostic text, which expresses the interconnectedness of all living things, reflecting the idea that nature and its creatures are essential guide towards spiritual truth. The fowls of the heavens and of the beast, whatever is beneath the earth or upon the earth, and the fishes of the sea, these are they that draw you unto the divine. And that concludes my lecture. And now I would love to open this up for dialogue.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. Your first presentation was awesome, but this one is just another amazing, very rich and profound messages, like throughout this, I don't know, 60 minutes or something. Like every single sentence you said was just full of wisdom and love and kindness. And I love this book. I really would like to read it. Thank you so much. And the images you have chosen, they are exemplary. Absolutely. They're just so beautiful. They really accompanied so coherently what you were saying to us. And I'd like to turn our attention to our dear Brenda. Thank you very much for being with us this evening in Central European time. I don't know where the rest of the audience is. Brenda, I'd like to ask you for any comments or questions you would have.
Oh, I thought it was very rich. Thank you so much, Michelle. For me, I picked out the problems with modern man. I mean, you were talking about him losing his instinct. And there was one bit that I thought about where you were talking about how modern man likes to control himself. And what that means is that sometimes if modern man or woman has a problem, instead of returning to the earth, they become ashamed of it. They don't seek a solution in their instinct. They put it aside because it's not rational. And that brings a conflict. And of course, conflict is banned if you're into well-being. If you always think of your well-being, conflict is not desirable at all. But as soon as you begin to do the work of this collaboration between the conscious and the unconscious, you get conflict. And it needs to be seen in a positive light. How do you work with conflict? And so this, I think, is the state of modern man and woman. It's at the same time, it's a conflict, and at the same time, it's a refusal of conflict. And this is pushed into the unconscious, and then it becomes explosive. So this is one of the little thoughts I picked out from the many thoughts that you gave us. So just to share that with you. And also you mentioned something else connected to this, that wholeness isn't possible without a journey through darkness. And the darkness is seen as negativity often, instead of a journey through your deepest instincts. And this is this challenge to maintain a civilized structure and at the same time to become rooted like a tree. This is really alchemy, which you also mentioned. Alchemy is the marriage of spirit and matter. So what is spirit? What is matter? Matter is not material, and people think that to be materialistic is to be involved with matter. But it's not the same thing. Materialism is an attitude. Matter is just what it is. Me sitting here and you sit, we're just matter. But it's not materialism, and these two are mixed up. So all these little linking bits, I won't go on anymore. I could go on all night. So I'll leave for other people to also say something.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you. Misha, would you like to comment on what Brenda said?
Oh, I think that is such a challenge because we live in culture and conditioning that we're always having, what is our deeper understanding of how to relate to culture, but also to our deepest selves. Jung's writings impacted me greatly in some of the things that he said. For example, is, we tend to want to look up at scripture or something outside of ourselves, and we don't reach the deep, archaic soul of ourselves as if it doesn't have something to tell us that would be far more profound. I mean, when I made the comment that truth moves, and I had to contemplate that for a while with the indigenous cultures, because it's the context, but the context of me is so different than the context of you because of my ancestry, because of I am birthed from a specific culture in a specific time. So then I go and maybe would look to different scriptures or words from different cultures to get insight, instead of really just staying with my own self and my dreams and asking for or having a relationship with my own darkness. Because I think that because of our the influence of many religions, we equate darkness as being bad or the boogeyman's in the darkness. So it's we need to learn how to relate to both our consciousness and our unconsciousness.
And the time element, how much time it takes to do this, which is it's a lifelong process. It's not getting yourself straight and then beginning your life. It's a process into which you do step.
It's true. I'd like to ask you a question. You said, Michelle, that that he wrote somewhere in one of the latest chapter that consciousness is the greatest gift and the greatest curse. What did he mean by that, especially the last bit, the greatest curse?
Well, how I understand that would be, I think, at least in the modern Western mind, we are all wanting consciousness. We want it so badly that we don't. The danger of it is that it will somehow invert itself because we're not in connection with our unconscious. So consciousness, yes, we may need it for order, the rationality, as Jung talks about, but the curse is that it can also then invert itself and have a reckoning because we haven't paid attention to our deepest, I guess, pagan bush soul. Maybe Brenda, you could even expound upon that, about how you perceive that statement.
I think myself that in the unconscious, I'm not talking about the state of unconsciousness now where someone knocks you out, not that. I'm talking about the unconscious. The other word is objective psyche. That's the real word for it. And in the objective psyche are conscious factors. That is, there are conscious factors hidden in the unconscious. And so when we go in to find that 10,000-year-old man, the primordial man, he's conscious, but we haven't noticed because we've not gone into that little door that you showed us at the end of the unconscious. You enter that door to find the primordial man. And he's in the unconscious. And he's conscious. He knows he's there, but we don't. We think we know everything. But we have to take a ladder sometimes and descend.
Thank you. We have a question from Michel Desprez, who said that Jung presents a great argument for teaching intuition as a social science, beginning in all primary schools. It is through intuitive understanding we can learn to balance our primitive and modern light and dark selves and not allow our technology to overcome all consciousness. How do you ladies feel about the idea of intuition as a form of education? Well, Michelle, I would like to include you in the ladies as well, not just the three of us. So, but Michelle Blair, first over to you. What do you think about Michelle's question?
Oh, I do think that our educational system is a bit lopsided, because I guess she's using the word intuition, and I would probably say instinctual. I was having a conversation with someone about the educational system with young children, and I thought it was so important that children garden, because they learn some of these very deep concepts of the organic processes and natural laws of life, the seasons, the process it takes, the time. You can't just hurry up something to grow. You see that something may die, and it rebirths. And so I think that is actually teaching the language of the soul, because that becomes your instincts. Like, how am I connecting with this piece of land, which Jung talks about? So I do think that how do you teach intuition is connecting a human and a young human with the earth, because it's already informing the processes without you having to tell them what intuition is or remain abstract. I think that's part of the education that we receive, or even in religious traditions. It's so abstract, and the Western mind is so abstract. But actually, the rituals are so important, because that's part of the embodiment, or as Campbell talks about, aligning the body, aligning the mind and the psyche, aligning it, helping it to integrate. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I can see how it would be wonderful if schools did that, or at least be at home. Maybe schools are not really responsible for teaching that. Maybe it starts with the home, your own plot.
Thanks, Michelle. Brenda, what do you think?
I think the example Michelle gave of teaching children to garden, so they know how long a thing takes to grow and they get a relationship with the earth, is really instinctive. That's the instinctive side, which of course has been neglected. It's there, but not cultivated. It's like leaving a tomato seed without soil and water. It's there, but it can't grow. But intuition is a faculty of every human being. There are many intuitives. I'm just trying to think of one which is unusual. For instance, the men on the stock exchange who play with currency. It's a well-known fact that they're extroverted intuitives, because they work out, they have no time to use rationality. So they have to intuit how the currency is going to go. And sometimes we link intuition with something mysterious, but it isn't. It's used every day. And the stock exchange people, you can see it happening. If you look at pictures of the London Stock Exchange, which is the only one I know, you can see how fast they work. No one using their rationality could work that fast on the currency exchange. So there you see in a modern demonstration of how intuition works, because intuition is really swift. And then we have the intuition of the artist, which perhaps we're more used to. And he also works swiftly. He or she works swiftly. Woof! Thinking is the slowest function of all. And we attribute thinking to things which perhaps we shouldn't. Sometimes people think that consciousness is thinking. That's quite common. They don't see consciousness as feeling or intuition, but they keep it to thinking because they're conditioned. So this distinction between intuition and instinctive is also interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Michelle agrees with it. She just wrote in the question answer box, and I do agree with you ladies, and also would like to add that maybe at some schools they are already present such curriculum where they take children out to little gardens and so forth. But I think that as we go as we grow rather and go to maybe high school and maybe universities, such approach is diverted to other aspects. And I think that's something that probably is almost losing that kind of like inner child effect, and also not talking about creativity and imagination. I think they're equally very important. I definitely remember that I missed that from my high school years, and it would have been nice and maybe even integrate more music as well. I'm sure that there are lots of these innovative schools. They include these in their curriculum, but I think it should be more widespread for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I do
maybe.
think I think technology has had a very significant impact on children not playing as much outside.
Mm,
I see children all the time on their iPads and phones at a very young age. And I think it's, back to when Jung was talking about our time-saving devices, they don't really save us time. They actually just make our time more filled with activities. There's not that repose or there's no time for imagination and play because we've taken our calendar and just made little slots about everything we're going to accomplish or do. And that, I think, causes for the parent to then be so exhausted from their own time management that it's easier to just put an activity, a TV or noise or something for the child, because then the parent has to switch modes and say, oh, let's go garden. And I think it's just that the technology and the zapping of the vitality of the human I don't think that they're aware of it. So they strive for, again, another diet or another pill or another something. So it's a vicious cycle that we get in because we don't really have this connection to our true natures.
True. Thank you. Michelle, there is a request from Barbara Forbes in the chat. She would like to have the names of some of the visionary artists whose images you used in your presentation. Well, you used so many of them, so I don't know how shall we go about this. Do you want to
I
share
don't know
your?
if I wrote down all the names. I like, because some of them were, some
Do
of them
you,
were
do
personal.
you want to maybe do you want to be in touch with Barbara directly and see?
She can just email me and I'll see if I have that information.
Would you mind to put your email address in the chat box, please?
Oh, how do I do that?
Do you want me to do it?
Oh, would you do that? Because I'm
Of course,
afraid I'll
of course.
disconnect me from this.
Oh, sure, sure, sure,
Not
sure. No worries.
technologically advanced here.
No worries. Okay, I will.
Right at the bottom, just below host and panelists. Can you see that little space?
Yeah.
Maybe it's under more. Oh,
There we are. Up it's come.
Okay, that's Michelle's
Oh.
email address.
great. Okay.
Now, if you have any questions from her, you can contact her directly, and I'm sure that she will be happy to dialogue with you further on. Do we have any more comments or questions from our dear audience? Anybody? No pressure, just a question because this is the time. You're welcome, dear Barbara. All right, well, if there is no other input from anybody from our dear audience, I would like to thank Michelle for the amazing 2 lectures she gave us. And it's just really wonderful. It was so rich and so profound that almost every single chapter could have had like a full-on class or course on. This is definitely the book to read for sure. Thank you so much on behalf of Ubiquity University, and for you too, Brenda, for joining us this time and last time. Your sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us is always just shining light. Thank you so much. And for
Also,
all,
this
sorry.
comment, absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. It
Oh,
says.
thank you. And thank you for joining and adding such richness to this work. Thank you.
It's really wonderful. It was. I learned so much new as always. So next time in November we will have Hermann Hesse's book on fairy tales. This is one of my favorite books, and our teacher will be Ludwig Fischer, who is a Hesse scholar. He a few years ago gave us a wonderful course on Hermann Hesse's work. So we invited him back. I was going to teach, or rather give my reflections on that book, but the sessions actually clashed with another course that I'm teaching. So I asked Ludwig to step in for me, and he's a scholar anyway. He's really wonderful. So please join us in November and December, and until then, please stay safe and well, and send prayers to all those people in the Gulf Coast and in Florida, so that nobody gets hurt, and the hurricane passes as swiftly as possible and without much damage caused. Yeah. All the best to you, and thank you very much for your presence. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.